Welcome, everyone, to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host, and with me for this whole series and many, many other episodes is my good friend and yours, Missy. Welcome back, Missy.
Hello again. Super stoked.
We are digging into, I guess this might be our final episode for a while, on balanced masculinity. And it is a concept that we haven't really approached, even though we've talked a lot about femininity in Star Wars, but we really wanted to dig into it in a lot of different ways within the lens of Star Wars. And we've actually gone into this quite a bit. So if you're interested in this topic overall, you can go back to our previous episodes where we talked about this, including the Orphean myth for Anakin. So that was more from a mythical lens perspective, as well as bell hooks and balanced masculinity. That was a great episode where we dug into sort of looking at Star Wars through the lens of bell hooks. And I am going to reference bell hooks a lot in this episode, but we wanted to specifically talk about how Star Wars achieves much of what we're talking about. And also dig into what Star Wars has been doing really continuously since the start of the story.
Also, shout out your co-host for that episode.
I recorded that episode with David Brady. You can just scroll down a little bit in the feed. I'm sure you'll find it.
It's super good. Enjoy.
And our third episode in this series was on the American monomyth and how it reiterates and traps many people in this cultural ideal that is anti this concept.
Yeah, it's just basically patriarchy squared is the best way to describe the American monomyth.
Yeah. So, we were quite critical as far as when Star Wars sort of doubles down on using the American monomyth versus when they use Campbellian monomyth, which is in alignment with a heroic journey to integrity and balanced masculinity. It is a heroic thing to have integrity. It is a heroic thing to love others. It is a heroic thing to care about the world yourself and try to heal it. And so as we dig into that, do you want to read our thesis statement?
I will. Yes. So our thesis for this episode is Star Wars stories show the path to a balanced masculine by depicting the failures of patriarchy, masculine characters acting through care instead of combat, and building community instead of destruction.
Absolutely. So as we talk about balance, I mean, it is a word that we throw around in Star Wars quite a bit, right? As people talk about it, they're like, you're off balance. You're not balanced. Especially Force users. You're out of balance. Balance is like the key to understanding, are you aligning more to the light side of the Force? Are you aligning to the dark side of the Force? Not saying that there isn't things that you need to be able to learn from the dark side of the Force. That is absolutely part of it. The dark side teaches us things about ourselves, and then we need to eat those things and understand those things and take them into ourselves, find the balance within those things, as well as, and then use those things to help others and to go in that direction. That's really, really important. But what does being unbalanced look like in Star Wars to you, Missy?
So a lot of times what it means is that you are rejecting a part of yourself. You are rejecting your dark side, or maybe you're rejecting your light side. And that's what we see these characters do over and over again. So a character like Soul, for instance, is rejecting his dark side. He's like kind of pretending it doesn't exist or trying to ignore it. And then a character like Ben Solo, for example, is rejecting his light side. I feel the call to the light, help me resist. He doesn't want it. And so these are characters who are out of balance because they're trying to reject one side of themselves. And I think what's important to keep in mind here is that okay, fine, there's balance, light, dark, etc. But why are we tying that to these gendered concepts of masculinity and femininity? And I think the real reason is because there's a big risk in Star Wars because of the heavy patriarchal content, I think, and the perspective often of the audience, of sort of assuming masculine bad, feminine good. And that is not correct. That is not accurate. And it's certainly not helpful to people who, have the most to benefit from the lessons that Star Wars teaches. So that's why I think it's so important to talk about, in the same way that we made a point of talking about dark feminine, what we are talking about arguably with balanced masculine is like a balance in light and dark. It is a light that accepts its darkness and a darkness that accepts its light. It is balanced. And so, what does that look like? What does it look like in Star Wars? And therefore, what does it look like for us, the audience?
And Bell Hooks calls this feminist masculinity.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people have an allergic reaction to calling something feminist. And I tend to want to use the language of Star Wars when I'm talking about Star Wars. And balance is everywhere in Star Wars. So let's talk about it from the lens of that. Bell Hooks has a really good quote about what unbalanced looks like, and how we see it is through, of course, the lens of Anakin, which we dug deep into in the Orphean myth, and as well as that Bell Hooks episode. But I just want to kind of get us back to that place of what does unhealthy look like? What does unbalanced look like? Patriarchy demands all males engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off emotional parts of themselves so that they can align with the culture. And we see that through the lens of Anakin, both sort of metaphorically and symbolically, as he is self-mutilated by cutting off his arms and legs in the fight with Obi-Wan Kenobi, but also cutting off his ability to love his community and others through his will to control things that feel uncontrollable, right? He goes to the temple and he kills younglings, and then he is basically stuck in this underworld-like state. He is a hero that is stuck in the underworld, thus becoming a villain. He is unable to grow and progress and change because he has cut off his ability to love others. And we're going to dig into how this wasn't always the case for him. How George Lucas himself, in the text of the prequels, talks about what good looks like for Anakin. And this is really, really important because in some ways, this is a cautionary tale. Like, it absolutely is a cautionary tale for men, for people who identify with masculinity. It shows that violence is not the answer. It shows that cutting off love and compassion, especially for others, is not the answer. But we have to have extreme examples of it to be able to feel the effects of it from a collective story and myth lens. All right, let's dig into balanced masculinity. And what I find so interesting nowadays is that there is sort of in our culture more and more stories about this male nurturing fantasy that has come around in the last 10 years. I would say that there's been an offshoot of girl dads and things like that have happened, right? Like you can shout out so many of them cross culturally, and I call it the male nurturing fantasy or the masculine nurturing fantasy, as opposed to the feminine power fantasy. And oftentimes, subconsciously, we fantasize about the things that are being denied to us cross-culturally because there's something missing, and we have a deep feeling in our psychology of that denial. And we just talked about how denial and like either denying or basically ignoring aspects of ourselves. You could tie this to the shadow concept in Jung. Ignoring large pieces of ourselves creates that imbalance in ourselves. And so we, as the audience, denying that masculinity can care for others, love, can be wise protectors, warriors, but also the dad that like changes the diapers.
Right.
Or the creative, like that men are allowed to be artistic and empathic and creative, is something that we as a collective culture are fantasizing about. And so it bubbles up in our stories.
Right. Yeah. And to your point, it is definitely, I've seen it a lot more, especially in the last few years. But I would argue it kind of was always there running under the surface. Do you remember the movie Leon the Professional?
No.
So it's actually quite famous because before she was in Star Wars, it was, I think, Natalie Portman's first film.
Oh, okay.
It's a girl dad story. He's the professional. He's an assassin. He's a professional assassin. And he ends up basically, I don't think it's him actually. It might be someone else in the story. But one way or another, her family gets taken out by a hit. So she's suddenly an orphan and just kind of becomes his ward, his protege. And it's very sweet that this assassin suddenly becomes a girl dad and has to figure out how to take care of her and everything. And, he on the one hand shares his way of life with her, and on the other hand, starts to look at his violent life in a different way because he doesn't want her to have that. It's really an interesting story, but that is probably one of the better known examples, I think, that existed before the current wave, where now it feels like there's stuff like this coming out all the time. Of course, most famously, like Pedro Pascal just can't stop being a girl dad in every single thing that he does.
Yeah, or just a father,
or just a dad,
dad. Like he's being very typecast.
He is extremely daddy, very daddy.
And I do want to call back, like this is not like new story. We do get these stories. There's like I'm on a Jane Austen kick, and I'm rereading all of the Jane Austens right now. And I just reread Sense and Sensibility, and Colonel Brandon, of course, is famously known for basically taking in his former like childhood sweetheart's child and caring for her is like his thing. And he tries to make her have a good life, but things get in the way, obviously, but he still cares for her long term. It's not like it's something that is like outside of the human psyche. It's been there all along. A famous inspiration for The Mandalorian is Lone Wolf and Cub as a story. It is something that is out there, that there is a child that a man needs to care for. We just seem to be getting more of these like stories, especially in Star Wars, that show heroism involves protecting the child. And as you know, metaphorically, the child represents the future of the world. It represents the future for the person. We also know that psychologically, by protecting the child, they're healing themselves, their inner child.
Yeah.
But we know that these stories are important. We know that they have been repeated over time. And it feels like almost every opportunity that Star Wars gets a chance to tell a story, there's some sort of version of this involved. In fact, so much that there isn't that many moms out there.
Yeah, right. And that's a whole other conversation that we've had before and probably will have again. But the idea of like, the masculine character with the foundling is extremely common in Star Wars, and arguably more common now than it ever was.
Let's dig into sort of what this looks like from a mythic perspective. If we were just to look at folklore and myth, how would we see this present itself in folklore? Caring masculine.
Yeah.
Where do we see these before this, if we go back, I guess, in history?
Yeah. So in oral folklore, the most common depiction of caring masculine, as we think of it, if you think of this character caring for the foundling or whatever, it is that We have often a man who frequently is a man who lives alone. He's by himself. At most, maybe he lives with his aging mother or something like that. But he will discover a wounded animal and he will nurse them back to health. Now, this shows up a lot of different ways. Sometimes the animal is just an animal. And sometimes they're a talking animal, sometimes they're a magic animal, sometimes they're actually a woman in disguise. Sometimes the idea is to show the difference between him and another character. So when you have the sort of like good brother, bad brother situation, you have the good brother nurses the creature back to health and is rewarded for it, and the bad brother will try to do the same thing but take shortcuts and cause harm on purpose and end up being punished for it. So it shows up a lot of different ways. But ultimately, it's not usually a person or a child. It can be, but that's rare. It is usually an animal. But the animal is supposed to be like you have shown care for this creature. You have, fed them, nursed them, helped them grow. And you will be rewarded for it in some way. And so that is the most frequent depiction of caring masculine in folklore. And then the other story is the sort of collective myth. And Marie Claire and I have referred to this a few times going through, because we said, it seems like there is some of this in Star Wars.
Yes.
But this idea of are there tales of a community coming together? And interestingly, yes, but once again, it seems to center on animals. You don't tend to see these stories as much with human characters, but you do tend to see a lot of times there will be some sort of threat to the natural world, and a group of animals, many different species, including usually predators and prey, will come together and they will discuss what to do. They'll all have their own strengths and gifts to offer, and they will come up with a plan to save their world. So it will either be they have to go on a quest sometimes, or that maybe they defeat some sort of threat, whatever it may be. But you will see that quite a lot. There's actually a story I really love. I think it's a Vietnamese folktale where the son is offended by something, and so she escapes over the sea, and so then everything is dying, and so then the animals all come together to figure out what to do, and they decide that they will work together to bring the sun back every morning, so that she can shine on their world. And I just thought that was such a beautiful story.
I'm often struck by Snow White and how masculinity is represented in it. It has this the hunter who is meant to kill Snow White, but instead he tricks the queen and allows her to escape. It has the dwarfs that are, all about mining and getting money out of the ground, but then end up caring for this lost maiden who, and then they learn how to care for themselves in addition to their world around them at the same time. These stories exist and they are out there.
Yeah.
But oftentimes they're through translation lenses, or, when they were locked in, they had a particular culture around them,
right?
When they were written down, and that's what the version that we have. So it's interesting for me to explore this in Star Wars because it's very much through the lens of the now and what the storytellers sense in their unconscious might be missing from our collective storytelling.
And I want to mention that another callback we have, not only to mythology, but also to conversations that we've had in the past, is this idea of a masculine character caring for a child specifically is in direct opposition to the House of Atreus.
Yep.
Which consumes the children. And we've talked about that before, about, systems of domination consume specifically children, the future, the next generation, the hope for the future. And so what this caring, balanced masculine does is preserves the future. And the same is true of this collective myth that kind of goes along with it, is that, we work together to preserve the future and to uplift it and to make something greater possible beyond ourselves.
And in that the House of Atreus represents consumption, you mentioned that, but the opposite of consumption is creation, healing, nurturing.
Mm-hmm.
All of the things that we see in these Star Wars stories are called to the forefront, and they're presented in a way that shows it as a heroic journey that these often male characters need to go on. And what I love about The Will to Change, which was written by Bell Hooks, is that she actually calls this out, that in the way that we need to look at anti-patriarchal stories and go towards a space by which we can not only heal ourselves, but also the society, is that we need to integrate the different aspects of ourselves, allow for this balance to happen. She calls this the quest for integrity, because it's about integrating the aspects to ourselves. And it's a big part of integration, is a big psychological theme in Jung, and Campbell talks about it as well. You need to integrate the parts of yourself that you don't want to think about. You need to eat those shadows.
Mm-hmm.
And that in it of itself is the heroic journey that can heal the masculine crisis and prepare the hearts of men to give and receive love. So these stories are important because for every man or person that's looking at masculinity in Star Wars, if they see it's actually okay to protect those I love, it's okay to love and care for the future, it's healing somebody. It's helping a little piece of the puzzle from a psychological perspective click into place.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of the most important things that Star Wars is doing right now, is telling these stories.
Yeah.
All right, let's dig into Star Wars examples of heroic change. I do want to say that, like, let's start with Luke Skywalker, because he's the OG. He's the first.
He's the
hero.
prototype.
He's the prototype, and he was actually raised in an adoptive family. He was given adopted mentors along the way, people who cared about him and his future, and they cared about it in that metaphorical relationship to saving the world. They knew by saving this young man and giving him an opportunity to understand himself, that he would be the thing that would save everything else. And through that, he is able to find himself and his own integrated self in Return of the Jedi by understanding his own darkness and the darkness that his father went through to be able to save not only himself, but his father. He throws his lightsaber away. He is a true Jedi, like his father before him.
Yeah. And there's several things in there. One is that despite some of the failures of his mentors, ultimately they succeed because they did put all of their energy into caring for the child, right? Yeah. And so
he had to listen to their actions, not their words.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like, you know, what is it? How they say, like, oh, they got the spirit. They got the spirit. Like, they had the right idea. Just, missing a couple things, like, ideologically. But no, like, there were things they got wrong, but they understood the importance of caring for Luke so that he could become the hero that he had the potential to be. And then it is also important, and we've talked about this so many times that I'm never going to stop repeating it, but the fact that Luke succeeds, he wins, he is victorious through the power of love and care and not through combat, and that is made explicit by him throwing away the lightsaber, is really critical, because what it means is that this anti-patriarchal story has been built into Star Wars from the beginning.
Yep.
It has always been there. So it's just, I will always just love Luke so much because of that. And then the fact that he returns to that then in The Last Jedi, where he's caring for Rey. And then later he has an act of care for Ben Solo where
he's unwilling to allow Ben to commit violence on him.
Exactly.
He does it in such a way that I take the violent opportunity away from you.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's beautiful. It's like it shows that in spite of everything, he still wants to care for his nephew, and he still he makes Ben's redemption possible by preventing him from enacting that violence on family a second time. And so it's really beautiful. And in fact, you know what? You could argue even Han doing that with sort of his act of love and touching his son's face when he
still loving him even though he has died.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. That is a heroic moment for Han Solo, is that he went out there knowing that he might die. He didn't care. He was going to, show love to his son regardless, And so I just think that it's important to remember that these characters whom we love and whom we associate with this, martial victory, in fact, most of the time they succeed through acts of love and care.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So I love it. I love that. And I love that Han's story even is about him obviously learning to put Leia's needs before himself. He also learns to serve the collective. The moment when he's announced as General Solo is a big deal because it's the first time he's joined a group to work together instead of just being, by himself. There's so many beautiful moments like that in the original trilogy that I just really, really love. And I like that, the best parts of the sequel trilogy call back to that. And so it's really wonderful.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Anakin. So Anakin starts out as a child, and in, of course, The Phantom Menace, we are told explicitly by Shmi Skywalker that he knows nothing of hate. He only knows how to love others, and he only knows how to care and help others. And so we're given a template by which, if the world didn't interfere with Anakin, the chosen one would be somebody pure like that would care and love others, have compassion, and seek to help others lighten the communal burden around them and give love freely.
And we see that through his actions when he's a child, right? He gives shelter to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. We see he's creative. He has built C-3PO.
He built his own pod.
Right, yeah. But just the fact that he's already given life even as a child by building 3PO, I think is extraordinary,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That, and the way that he cares about his mother, the fact that he, volunteers to compete in the pod race for, his new friends, just everything. It's really beautiful to see who he is in, as a child, as the best version of himself that he will rediscover much later. It just takes a lot of time.
Takes a lot of time. And by leaving his mother, we have him enter the world of patriarchal masculinity. You and I have talked about how the Jedi are patriarchal. What they represent, especially in the Clone Wars, ends up being that violent patriarchy that corrupts them. And we now see through the Acolyte that they had patriarchal ideals. Issues. Earlier on. And so the downfall of the Jedi is entirely related to the patriarchy. And the lessons that Anakin learns are not just from Palpatine, but he maintains a corrupted but cultural idea of the Jedi, even as Darth Vader, even as this incredibly unbalanced version of Anakin. He maintains this, and it's called out in A New Hope, of course. You're the only person that's into this ancient religion.
Sad religion, yeah.
Sad religion. And he's definitely got a corrupted version lens of that sad religion, but he's one of the few that actually still exists on that spectrum. And he has taken a very like extremist view of what it is, that you're either in or you're out.
Yeah, and
everybody's
it's also
out.
sad. It's also sad because he did actually, you could argue that at the moment when he's like, from my perspective, the Jedi are evil or whatever. Like you could argue that he has actually hit upon some of the real problems with the Jedi. The problem is that his reaction to it, because of the influence of Palpatine, is to double down on the patriarchal aspect. Like rather than go, oh wow, the Jedi got some things wrong, I wonder what's missing. He just was like, I just got to go harder.
And from the point that he becomes unbalanced, he is stuck in this, I would say, psychological, unconscious purgatory. He is unable to move beyond this death-like state that he is in, because when you are stuck in this shadow version of yourself, this shadow archetype, you're unable to grow. There is no growth that happens when you are stuck in the underworld. So he himself is sort of stuck there until he sees himself reflected in his son and in his desire to care for his son. And it's slow over the course of the original trilogy, because first he wants to seek him out. He wants to find a relationship. There's like a proposal scene. We can rule the galaxy, as father had said, because he wants that relationship with Luke. But he can't have that relationship be a balanced relationship because he also seeks things through violence. He proposes through a fight. That is not a way that you learn
after chopping his hand off. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. That's not the way that you learn to love others. But he still continues on, and these ideas infiltrate him, and we see it through the course of Return of the Jedi. And finally, when Luke, reflecting the lessons that have been learned, throws away his lightsaber, he decides to take action to protect his son.
And to a great extent, you could argue it's because Luke has actually modeled that care that Anakin has been unable to see for so long. Because, even when Luke approaches him on Endor, it's the whole, like, he turned over his weapon. He's, so he came not with the intention to fight. And Luke specifically tells him, I believe that you're still Anakin Skywalker. And also, here is Luke telling him to his face, I care about you. I see you as my father. I want you to be better. I want you to let this go. And I won't fight you. It's like, so even though Luke then still has to face down the ultimate test of Palpatine and urging him to give in to his dark side, he has already modeled that care for Anakin. And so at that moment, to your point, that he throws away the lightsaber, Anakin sees he's willing to die and out of care and love rather than use combat to defeat his father or to save himself, and he won't do it. And so that's what gives him the strength to do it, because it's been modeled for him. So that's kind of, I think, the importance. And I think it's really extraordinary that we get to see that as a child to a parent, because pretty much every other example we're going to look at, with the exception of maybe one, are a mentor or a parent to a child. And so being able to model care from a child to a parent is really wonderful. And actually, you know what? Not to get ahead of ourselves, but just so I don't forget, I think you could argue that Grogu models care to Mando with his healing.
He does, yeah. I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Yeah. Because oftentimes the child is the elixir, right? From a mythological motif perspective. Let's dig into Din Djarin and the Mandalorian. When this story came out and the first episode launched, and it turned out that this was not going to be the story of a badass bounty hunter blazing a path of violence across the galaxy, I was so happy. Yeah. When we saw the little perambulator, the little hand, all of what this represented, I was like, Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And so we've had 3 seasons with The Mandalorian and Grogu, and it has gone up and down. They've gone through different trials together. He tried to send him away to kind of reject this aspect of himself. He ended up being like, okay, I can't do that. And it all comes from a foundation that the Mandalorian sort of cult that he's part of puts protection and care of the foundlings. So anyone who is a found child of like all of the disaster in the galaxy above all else. This is the way, is to protect the children, care for the children, have them grow up safe and nurtured as well as trained in the Mandalorian way. Absolutely, that Mandalorian way involves violence. Weapons are my religion. But Mando actually, through the course of his relationship with Grogu, learns that protecting him and protecting the galaxy and to make it a better place for Grogu is the ideal. It's so cool. It's so cool. He actually ends up like giving up leadership to just be a dad. Through this, we have, of course, Grogu that heals Mando. We have him heal Din. We see that he is basically an elixir or like the Holy Grail equivalent in Star Wars. He has this ability to heal, but that's just the metaphor too. Through protecting and nurturing the children, through protecting and nurturing the future, we ourselves are healed. Through having compassion and love for things outside of ourselves are healed. What's really cool is because this is a heroic journey through caring, nurturing, protecting, we see the original home, that's now run by Griff Karga as the mayor of the place. That community is slowly healed and is protected from outside forces as a community. Pirates attack and they protect it. And then that's where Din and Grogu go and settle down on a little farmstead outside of the city. And he becomes basically kind of like the sheriff of the town.
Yeah. Yeah. Like he's there, he's caring for everyone, he's caring for his adopted son, he's growing stuff. Like it's very, to your point, like for all the ups and downs in the show, like the upshot of the whole thing is really just him learning to care and he becomes more balanced because he's not just consumptive and extractive, which is how he was when he was just a bounty hunter. Like he was just, I take, right?
I cause death, I take, I get money out of the situation. It's transactional instead of building.
Right.
Instead, he is not really like, maybe he's on the payroll, right, of the city, but
who knows? But
like, that's not the focus. The focus is that he has, through his own journey, healed his world. He healed Tatooine with Boba Fett. He healed Mandalorian groups because of his efforts. Like through healing yourself, you heal the community too.
Exactly. And that's what I love is that those two kind of historic myths that we talked about that show up here in the balanced masculine, which is the masculine nurturing fantasy and the sort of collective myth. Those are both in Mando's story.
And we have different groups of Mandos coming together to protect things. We'll get more of that in probably the eventual the MCU Avengers level movie that is planned eventually. I'm sure because it'll be like, and Boba Fett is there and the skeleton crew. And we'll get everybody coming together to fight off a big bad evil. In the galaxy, and that will be that collective myth of everybody healing all together, coming to basically protect the galaxy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Clone Wars.
Yes. So in Clone Wars, that was the thing that came to mind when I was thinking of this, this nurturing masculine, balanced masculine, was an episode called The Defector. And it always stood out to me because, like, bluntly speaking, I often found like the clone-centric episodes of Clone Wars to be kind of dull. I was always like, get back to Anakin. That was the only thing that mattered to me. But in this case, it was one of the ones I really liked. And it's a Clone Wars episode in which I think Rex during a mission is like injured, and so he gets taken in by a family and ends up discovering that the father in this family is a clone who defected and like left them behind. And he's married, he has kids, he works on a farm. I want to note, by the way, that this guy took his wife's last name, so feminist king.
Well, they don't give them last names as
no,
members.
They don't. But that's the point. I love that because they don't give them last names. It's like, cool, I'll take her name, and I'm like, yes. So anyway, point being, it's so he's living like this, and he and Rex over like his dinner table have this whole conversation where, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact lines, but it did stand out to me that he basically says, and his name is Cut LaQuaine, and he says, I'm living. I have a life. You are not truly living. You don't really have a life because you're just destroying. You're just fighting. You're doing what they made you to do. I decided what I wanted my life to be, and I wanted a family, and I wanted this life, and so it's really ends up creating a bit of an identity crisis for Rex. He's sort of like, who am I? And it's interesting because they don't refer to it for a while, but I think if you could see the impact it has on Rex, it's where he's not as focused on following orders, and he's a lot more focused on protecting his brothers. And so I do think that that's really the impact that it has on Rex, is this idea of like, well, what life am I choosing for myself? And of course, we know that becomes important much later, because then in Rebels, he has to choose again what to fight for and everything. So it's really important. And I just think it's an extraordinary episode because, here we see this clone becoming a family man and like I said, growing things. And it's just, it's really extraordinary.
And it's not surprising that they would pull in Cut into season 1. It's actually season 1, episode 2 of The Bad Batch. So they show like the remainder episodes of The Bad Batch that they had previously only rotoscope or done initial like trial animation of. They had animated those for Clone Wars season 7, so you get those. But the actual Bad Batch series, it's episode 2, Cut and the LaQuaines come back, and we have the full Bad Batch interact with them as part of this, basically to say, what is this all about? Why do you care about this? Because they have essentially adopted a brand new child of their own in Omega. And so like, it was a nice way to kind of bridge that family was possible for these stories. And if you haven't watched The Bad Batch, and I want to reiterate this for all of these things that we've talked about, I have covered The Mandalorian. I've covered The Bad Batch. I've covered Kenobi, which we will get into, Skeleton Crew, and of course The Acolyte. I talk about these things in depth as part of the deep dives for each of these episodes, because this is something that we have been aware of, Missy, you and I, for so long. And we sort of sprinkle it in our conversations as we bring up different motifs. But we wanted to put it all together in one place, because I think that when you look at these stories cross storytelling, you're like, wow, there's a big theme happening here in Star Wars. It's everywhere. And it absolutely is. The Bad Batch is entirely, from a bell hook's lens, the story of men that were bred and born to be violent and have a mission and not allowed to love, not allowed to grow, not allowed to nurture, and how they make it back from that. It also has some other lenses to do with like, giving up being, an active participant in war, how to build community as a veteran, how to work your way past all of those challenges. The Bad Batch with Omega end up on a planet called Pabu, which is sort of like a paradise of balance. It has this sort of mountainish type volcano shape. It's like this little island in amongst this ocean, and everyone in that place allows the Bad Batch to find a home and to raise Omega. And that's where they end up by the end of the show. After they've been through all of their journeys, they end up just living a good, nurturing, caring community life in this location.
Yeah.
Through that, they have to struggle with, do we join the battle again, basically against the Empire, or do we focus on raising this girl that is found ourselves as my 4 dads,
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Plus Echo and Rex, my uncles. Like it's a constant struggle about what is, do we protect the whole world or do we protect Omega? And they do find that balance in that, because they still need to help, and they get asked by Rex and Echo to help quite regularly, as well as dealing with their own challenges with those that are left behind, like Crosshair, and how he comes back later on.
Yeah.
It's not an easy journey for everyone.
No, and I think that's what's kind of beautiful about it, is that it's a hard decision for anyone to make, right? Because it's a question, because again, as much as the child represents the parts of yourself that need care, it's always a hard decision of how much of your energy to give to that care and how much to give to the community.
Yep.
And it can be it's a hard balance to find. So the idea that this balanced masculine has discovered what is just right, right? How much care does this child, inner child or otherwise, require? And how much can I give to my community? And discovering that is really that key to living the balanced life.
And they do a really amazing job of it throughout this whole story of the Bad Batch with the different lenses. It's kind of like different archetypes that exist within ourselves. We have Hunter, who is the leader and the main primary dad. We have Wrecker, who's like the fun sort of himbo-like dad. We have Tech, who's like the teacher and the sort of more analytical one. And of course, we have Crosshair, who's the emotional one. Like, you have these different archetypes that are within ourselves. And we can see all of the different ways by which they all care and love and express love through that. It's really cool. Like, I'm such a Bad Batch advocate because I really didn't know what to expect. Based on the Clone Wars episodes, which I had watched in their rough animation form when they originally were released on like StarWars.com, I didn't know that they would be doing this. But as soon as they did, I was like, well, they're doing this. That's the theme. That's what they're doing. And it would be weird for me to see a major property without something about creating balanced masculine in it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just, to your point, though, the fact that Mando and Bad Batch came out around similar times and had almost the exact same theme was like really fascinating. And that to your point is what first tipped us off, I would say, to like, oh, this is clearly something Star Wars is focusing on right now. This is something that's bubbling up, and not to like armchair psychoanalyze like Favreau and Filoni, but like, I think it's very evident that like this is something they both were exploring around similar times. Which is really fascinating.
And I do want to call out, like, Boba Fett has themes of community healing as well as nurturing that happen within it. They're a little bit more randomly applied, but they're absolutely there. I just didn't want to dig into them too much. I do want to talk about Kenobi.
Yes, that's another one that kind of shocked everyone, right? It's like no one knew that Leia was going to be the focus. And so similarly, you're sort of like, "Oh, what kind of adventure is Kenobi going to go on?" And then it's like, "Nope, he needs to go rescue Leia."
He needs to be a girl dad for a while.
He needs to be a girl dad for a little while. That's what he needs. And I love that so much. So in the same way that you're like a big like Bad Batch advocate, I'm like a huge Kenobi advocate. I listen, I know it's not everyone's favorite show, but I really, really enjoyed it. And there were so many things I loved about it. And high on is the idea that they looked at who is this character? What does he need? What is missing from this story? Because we don't want to tell a story that doesn't need to be told, you know?
Right.
And they were able to say, you know, well, first of all, he needs this. He needs this care and this nurturing and to find purpose again. That's what he needs. And also this idea that his story with Luke will come.
Yep. They know that.
There's room for a story with Leia, and it made sense because then it sort of builds that relationship that then she's willing to turn to him in her hour of greatest need, and so on and so forth. So I really, really loved it, and I loved seeing him caring for her and answering her hard questions about the Force and everything. Like that just was great stuff. Yeah,
yep.
So good.
And,
so good.
And just seeing them together, like, was so good. Let's talk about Skeleton Crew, because this one also ended up having sort of two really important stories in amongst this. We see loving families in it, and of course it has a particular Amblin style, right?
Yep.
So like that particular style from the 80s. I'm referring to, of course, Amblin Productions, E.T.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of idea of like, this is 1980s, but in Star Wars. So you're going to have these family members that though they care and they love their children. Their children are off on their adventure, and all they can do is sort of like wait around and be available when they need them. That is very of the 80s.
Yeah. And Wynn's father, I think, is an interesting character in that sense, because he clearly loves Wynn, but he's also just, again, kind of so trapped in the system he lives in that he's sort of just unaware of Wynn's needs.
Yeah, and he does end up breaking out of that, and all of them do.
Yeah.
Break out of the system, break out of the expectations of, I would say this, in so many ways, it's like capitalism.
Yeah.
Like in some ways, like that's what they break out of.
Yeah.
But we have this character of Jod Nanawood, who is like gets most of the way through a heroic, balanced masculine journey, and then reverts really, really bad.
Yeah, so it's a pretty bad regression.
It's good to see those two, because we see him in the end, although he's not dead. Like, thank goodness they didn't kill him. He's unhappy in the dark and alone.
Yeah.
It shows you what you get for not caring for others in a true way. And through that, Fern calls him out the whole show and says, you're just in this for yourself. We can't truly trust you. You're not really in this. And his reward is to be alone at the end.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And we have another character and a beautiful moment.
Yes. All right. So this to me is one of my favorite Star Wars moments of recent years, which is, so Wynn, of course, his character, he dreams of the Jedi. He dreams of being a Jedi. When they discover the lightsaber, it's like this massive moment for him where he's so excited because like, this is what I've always dreamed of. And so the point being that, like many boys, Wynn fantasizes of being a hero through combat. That is how he views the Jedi's heroism, is they win battles, they win duels, they win wars. That's how he views it. And Wynn's heroic moment comes, but it's not what he thought it would be. He is a hero when he saves KB by helping her with her malfunctioning implant. It's going to kill her. if he doesn't fix it. And it requires him following her directions and creating something and putting it all together. And this is his moment, is care. He cares for her. He heals her. And that is his big heroic moment in this story. And I just thought it was the most beautiful scene. And I think, doesn't she even say he's a hero at the end of the scene? I think she does.
Yep. You are a hero. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so sweet and I love it. And that's a great example of the nurturing masculine because, that was the real way to be a hero, was to help her when she needed help.
We also have an example in The Acolyte with Soul, and he is attempting to be this nurturing masculine figure in Osha's life.
Yep.
But it ends up becoming obsessive, and he ends up becoming like a shadow version of himself. And so we see this with Anakin, of course, but it was so interesting to see in so many ways a failure to get down this path. And I don't really want to talk too much about it. We covered this over a year ago in detail.
Yes.
So go back to those episodes, of course.
Right. But then also I want to mention that we do see, even though Kymir is a dark sider, and even though he kills a lot of characters, we also see him being caring because he heals Osha when she's injured, and he puts a little blanket over her, and he lets her sleep in his bed, and he makes her food, and leaves clothes for her. He's also very caring, and I think that, if the story were to continue in some fashion, I think what you will see is him discovering that is where his true power lies. The nurturing, we would find some sort of change in him long term.
Right. There's a lot of things to be said about the lens by which a story is told, and Kymir represents the masculine within Osha herself that she always needed, but was sort of denied because of the patriarchy of the Jedi from Soul.
Yep. Yeah. So it's sort of like two versions of the masculine that she faces. And both of them have nurturing aspects, but one is patriarchal and one is not. And the result is what you would expect it to be.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Let's talk about Andor and Rogue One.
Yeah. So this one there's some nurturing stuff in there, and we'll talk about that briefly. But I would say this one leans a lot harder into the collective myth, which is appropriate for the story it's telling on a macro level. Because we know that Cassian Andor's journey ends with him giving himself up for the collective. He, sacrifices himself for the community. And so the story, of course, is how he and the other characters of Rogue One, obviously Jyn and many others, it's how they get there. And so Andor, if you look at it, it includes, there is the collective myth in terms of, especially the final episode of season 1, when Ferrix comes together and at the urging of the ghost of Marva, they go out and they try to defeat the Empire, or at least to fight back against the Empire. And what's interesting about that is that also includes lots of acts of care. Like them fighting the Empire is actually an act of care for one another. They are protecting one another. And there's so many beautiful moments. There is, the way that they, the reverence shown to Marva's body after she passes away. Like there's this whole moment of the community is together and they're taking care of Bee, and they're going to, take her out and take good care of her and everything. It's the whole way they approach the funeral. The whole community is involved. You have the music and everything. And then they're helping Andor escape and everything. And of course, he's coming back to try to save Bix and da-da-da. So everybody's looking out for each other. Everyone's caring for each other. This community is coming together and making sure that they're all okay. And so that's just really beautiful. In season 2, there is unfortunately less of that. And or it happens off screen. Because at one point we know they build Yavin Base, but the building of Yavin Base happens off screen. And it's a shame because that's the community that is built in season 2. Is, you know, they come together, they take care of each other. It's a home. They've got it. They all
there
have
is
their
homes
roles.
on the base.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. They all have roles and they all protect one another and everything. So that's very important. And that's why then Yavin, we've always talked about, is treated like this, like it is the promised land in season 2. And then, of course, in Rogue One, even before Andor existed, Rogue One is sort of the ultimate collective myth in that it is all these people who, to a great extent, only cared for themselves or their immediate surroundings, the people around them, and were drawn into this larger struggle and willing to give everything in order to care for the community. And so I really love that because you see it happen on multiple levels in Rogue One. I love that obviously there's the members of Rogue One themselves. They show up and Jyn has that great little speech about like, we take the next chance and the next until we win or the chances are spent. And I've always talked about how that's actually very similar to what you hear soldiers saying who were present on D-Day is that's what they did. On D-Day, it was just, we take the next chance, and either it'll work or it won't, but we're going to try because it's what we have to do. And so I love that. And then you have the reinforcements that come from the Rebel Alliance. They're all there, part of the collective. Even though they said they weren't going to come, they show up anyway to help out. And then later, once they have the plans, the emphasis for most people of the final scene is on Darth Vader. But really what's happening is you have these men who know they're going to die, desperately trying to get the plans from one person to the next. Take it, like they'll do anything to protect the future because at that point, the Death Star plans are like the child, right? It's like, we have to protect these at all costs because it's the future.
It's the future. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so, and eventually they're able to get it to Leia. And so I just think that Andor and Rogue One, even for some of their flaws, they really just contain some of the most beautiful collective myth that we see in all of Star Wars.
Absolutely. Like really, everyone really in it together. It takes every opportunity to mean success. Yep. And every person matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also about like, that quote, we're going to fail better next time. Like they don't do it smoothly. It's not easy, but everybody's just continuously pushing towards the same goal. I want to say like, with the lens of everything that we just talked about, Missy, what does this mean for you when we look at ourselves and to the world that we live in? What are the things that we're supposed to take home with us?
I think for me, it really is that question we talked about earlier of how much do I need to give to my children, to the child in myself? How much do I need to give to my family that needs my care? And how much do I need to give to the collective, to my community? And it's a very, very topical question because my community is under threat, right? There's extreme danger to the larger community, certainly in the United States and to a great extent worldwide. And so I have to think about how much energy do I need to give to each of those? How can I provide care to myself and the people that need me in my life, and then also to all the other people that need me to be a part of protecting the future?
Yep. It is a hard thing to know. I think that one of the things that we learn through mythological storytelling, which is just a reflection of the storyteller's unconscious, it is the language of the night, it is how we communicate to each other, it is how we heal ourselves collectively, is that loving others, having compassion for others in our own familial circle, in our neighborhood, in our communities, in our world, is this light side, is this balance that we see. This is what Star Wars is telling us. Love and trying to create the world by which it is easier to protect the familial unit, making a better tomorrow, guaranteeing food, shelter, love, nurture, is all part of the full hero's journey that we talk about. It is the truth of what you're trying to get to. If there is a monster, sometimes we have to go out and slay the monster to protect the community. But it is also a heroic act to be there for somebody who needs you. It is also a heroic act to build community. And we knew this more when we had sort of religious institutions that expected that of us culturally, I think. And that's why Lucas with Star Wars always wanted to have a mythology that would show goodness and an ethical lens, and one that showed how to come together as a community. So to leave this, we need to create a culture that enables masculinity to love. We need to have family and community support giving love, food, shelter, care, healing, creation, all are acts of love. All are acts of love.
Yeah.
And then thus by creating a culture of this, learning how to love in family life, in the familial life, gives those skills to the next generation.
Yeah.
And allows the community to heal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in particular, one thing to consider is that these are stories of masculine heroism featuring care and the collective. So it's saying this is what heroic masculinity can look like. It doesn't just look like the sword fighting. It doesn't just look like, the blasters. That's, or blowing something up. Or it's like, that's not all that it is. And so it is creative as well. So Star Wars is showing us how including the creative masculine allows it to be balanced.
Yes. And in so many ways, it's if we can take away the problems with the culture of the Jedi, what the Jedi or a light force user should be, right? And that's always the metaphor for the soul. What does balance look like? Well, it's that you love others.
Yeah.
That you accept your own darkness and that you look towards how to help and love others.
Yeah. And that's the Jedi at their best. And, who knows if we'll ever really see it, but it's like everyone's striving for it, right? Which I think is great. So,
it's just hard that it's muddled in its own storytelling.
Yeah.
That the representatives of the Jedi that we see are in truth struggled with democracy. Sometimes the best thing that you can do is tell people the truth with, a particular tone as applied to it. Yeah. Palpatine always said that the Jedi were stuck up in their own rules. And it was true.
Yeah.
But does that mean that everything needed to be thrown away? No.
No, but it's also, I think, but that's also the whole idea of, we've always talked about the cycle of consumption and creation. Sometimes the old things have to die so that the new can be born. And so I do think that that's another aspect of this, is that the balanced masculine sort of appreciates that cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And so it's similar to how we talk about, when we're talking about the feminine, especially the wild feminine, we often talk about, that for many women, that cycle exists in our bodies. And so that might look very different for some men. But it's the idea of becoming in tune with that cycle and appreciating your role in it, and understanding that we can't be just the consumptive aspects. We also have to be creative. And so, and that's how you become part of that cycle. So, very Lion King, circle of life kind of thing. Mufasa is a great example, right? Because he understands his role in the cycle of life, and he dies saving the child, but he ensures the continuation of the cycle. So I think that's another one. And that will bring us back a little bit to some of the problems with sacrificial death, especially for masculine characters in Star Wars. And we know there are some issues with it. But at the same time, there is also a place for it. Like, like Vader dying to save Luke kind of works because of the fact that he is the parent ensuring that the child can continue. Yep. And same thing for Luke later when he sort of sacrifices himself for Ben and for Rey, like same thing. Yep. So there is a place for that. I think as long as it doesn't become a question of telling men that their only role is sacrifice. It's not. Yeah. There is also creation and love and joy. So
hardest thing to do in this world is to live in it. And the bravest thing you can do is live for yourself and others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
This was awesome.
This was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good way to tie it up for now. I'm sure we'll explore this in the future with different properties as well as different stories that are being told. Especially when you hear that Starfighter is going to be about an uncle and nephew story.
Okay.
You're like, okay, it's coming back.
Yeah, you're like, yep, there we go.
There we go. Check mark theme. But it is important for everyone to recognize and to see this is something that is on the minds of many, many creatives at Lucasfilm, and it's consistent across the board. It's as consistent as light side, dark side.
Yeah.
It's as
agreed.
consistent as collective coming together storytelling is really, really important. And we are powerful as a community.
Mm-hmm.
We are powerful when we protect the future of others too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Missy. This is great.
Thank you, Marie Claire.
All right, Missy, where can people find you if they're looking for you online?
Please look for me on Tumblr, where I am All Girls Are Princesses.
Thank you, everyone. And I hope you definitely check out Bell Hooks' The Will to Change if you're interested more in this topic. And go back and listen to all of our coverage of all of these different shows we mentioned, because we talk about that throughout it in more specific detail. Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our orchestral music is by Christy Carew for What the Force. You can support the show directly on Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Christian R., Adrian, Sarah Joy, Scott, John, In Wild Space, Minky Moo, Derek C., How Rude, Christian Luca, Carly Ann, and Scott C. Support the show by wearing the Force with our merch. Like and subscribe on YouTube, or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. You can connect with us on Blue Sky at WT Force, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, or on our website at whattheforce.ca, or our Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.